Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a reclusive ex-investigator discovers a drone flying over his private lake, he uncovers a chilling conspiracy. A powerful HOA is trying to steal his land. What begins as a trespass spirals into corruption, fake arrests, and a battle that could expose a nationwide scheme. I've seen a lot of crap in my day. I put handcuffs on crooked contractors who thought zoning laws were optional, watched white-collar devils cry when federal marshals took their golf clubs as evidence, and once interviewed a guy who swore his dog forged his signature. So, believe me when I say I thought I'd seen it all. That is, until a drone with a miniature HOA flag buzzed over my lake like it was claiming territory for a banana republic. It was early May, the kind of morning that smelled like cedar and wet stone. I'd just come back from checking the trout traps near the north edge of the water. That lake, my lake, was mirror still, the pine-covered ridges beyond it dusted with spring mist. It was quiet, private, and mine. 100% mine. No association dues, no committees telling me what color to stain my porch, no flag rules, no passive-aggressive bake sales. Just peace. That is, until I spotted her, standing right at the edge of my dock like she belonged there. Blonde ponytail, oversized sunglasses, tight athletic wear that probably cost more than my truck's suspension. She was fiddling with a controller, looking up, clearly tracking the little flag-waving drone now circling overhead. "Can I help you?" I called out, not yelling, yet. She didn't flinch. She turned her head, raised a manicured hand, and said, "Oh, hi. You must be Milo. I'm from the Clearview Shores HOA. I'm conducting a site verification for our updated community access plan." I stopped dead in my tracks. "You're from what now?" "Clearview Shores," she repeated, like I hadn't heard it the first time. "We're just down the ridge. You probably know Karen Lockwood, our president. This lake's part of the parcel under consideration for recreational integration. The district just passed a measure." I laughed, not out of amusement, out of disbelief. "No, ma'am, you're standing on private land. This lake is deeded, surveyed, and locked tighter than Fort Knox under Idaho's private property statutes. There's no integration. You're trespassing." She frowned, but it wasn't confusion. It was the smug kind of frown you see on someone who's used to being obeyed before they finish talking. According to the revised GIS boundary maps filed in March, this shoreline falls within proposed transitional access jurisdiction. That means... Nope, I cut in, stepping closer. "What it means is you're going to take your drone, your fake flag, and your HOA pixie dust and get the hell off my dock, now." She blinked, then looked past me, like she expected backup to rise out of the bushes. When none came, her expression cracked into something theatrical, eyes wide, mouth parted, the whole performance. And then, God help me, she screamed. "He's threatening me!" I froze. She took 2 steps back, wobbled deliberately on her heels, and collapsed on the dock like someone yanked her puppet strings. "You pushed me. You assaulted me." I just stood there, holding my phone, which had been recording since the moment I saw the drone. I calmly turned it toward her, making sure her little Oscar-worthy tumble was captured in high definition. "You done?" I asked. She didn't answer. She curled up on her side, peeked through one eye to make sure I was watching, then resumed her dramatic gasping. I backed up slowly, not saying another word, and headed up toward the house. I figured this would end with a nasty letter or maybe a weak lawsuit. I dealt with worse. Hell, I half expected Karen Lockwood to show up herself with a packet of bylaws and gluten-free muffins. Instead, what I got was a knock on the door the next morning. A uniformed deputy, nice kid, maybe 25, stood there with a folded piece of paper in hand. "Mr. Crane?" "That's me." He shifted awkwardly. "I have a summons for you to appear regarding a complaint filed with Bonner County Law Enforcement. Allegation of assault. You're not under arrest at this time, but they want you to come in for a voluntary statement." I took the paper, looked it over, then looked him dead in the eye. "Let me guess. Victim's name is something like Ashley? Chelsea." He cleared his throat. "Kendra Mallory." I sighed. Close enough. "Yeah," I muttered. "Figured as much." That night, over bourbon and half a pork shoulder, I told Abigail everything. She'd arrived just after the dock incident, having driven up from Coeur d'Alene for the weekend. We were old friends, once colleagues in the prosecutor's office before she moved into elected office. The timing was pure coincidence, but damn if it didn't feel like fate. Jesus, Milo, she said, scrolling through the video on my phone. This is some backyard Shakespeare. You think it'll stick? Abigail snorted. Not a chance. But that doesn't mean they won't try to make it stick, especially if Karen has half the political pull you say she does. She has more than half. She's friends with 2 county commissioners, and rumor is she plays tennis with the sheriff's wife. Well, she said, standing up and stretching, I hope you're ready for company. Why? Because if this is the opening move, they're not just fishing, they're hunting. I didn't sleep well that night, not because I was afraid. I'd faced worse with worse odds, but something about this was off. Sloppy, sure, but orchestrated, calculated in the way that only petty tyrants and bored socialites could be. I sat out on the porch with my old .357 caliber on the table beside me, watching the moonlight ripple across my lake. My lake. Not a square foot of it was theirs. Not one damn inch. And come hell, or HOA, I'd keep it that way. I woke up to the sound of tires on gravel. Not slow tires, not curious tourist tires. These rolled like they had a purpose. It was just past 5 in the morning, still dark out. My porch lights flicked on automatically, catching the gleam of 2 SUVs and a marked sheriff's cruiser crawling up my drive like wolves closing in on a deer that hadn't realized it was dinner yet. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe some backcountry accident, maybe a neighbor flagged them down. Then I saw one of the SUVs angle sideways to block the drive, and 3 officers stepped out in full gear, vests, belts heavy with toys, radios squawking low static. Not a social visit. I opened the front door slowly, arms visible, nothing in my hands but my damn coffee mug. I didn't say a word. One of them, older, mustached, and carrying himself like he watched too much cable news, stepped forward. Milo Crane? Yeah. You are hereby taken into custody under Idaho Statute 3351A, emergency public safety detainment, pursuant to confirmed reports of violent behavior and threat to community members. Hands where I can see them. I blinked once. You've got to be kidding. We're not, he said, already unsnapping cuffs from his belt. That's when Abigail stepped out onto the porch. Hair a mess, boots unlaced, wearing one of my old flannel shirts like it was a damn robe. She didn't look like a prosecutor. She looked like hell warmed over in a coffee pot, but her eyes were wide open. What the hell is going on? She barked. Ma'am, step back inside, said the same officer. You're arresting him. For what? He ignored her. Another officer came up the steps. Sir, we need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. I laughed, short and sharp. You boys even have a warrant? He pulled it from his vest pouch, unfolding it with the smugness of someone holding a royal flush. Abigail snatched it before I could even read the heading. Her eyes darted left to right. This was signed at 3:48 this morning, she said, voice tightening. By Judge Benbrook. He doesn't handle criminal matters. Emergency override, said Mustache. Emergency my ass, Abigail snapped. This is an HOA civil complaint dressed up as criminal cause, and it's based on a single unverified statement by a woman who trespassed and faked an injury. I saw the footage myself. Ma'am, you're interfering. I am Abigail Blair, District Prosecutor of Bonner County, and unless you want to explain this cowboy routine to the State Ethics Board, you will tell me why this warrant bypassed review and went straight through a judge who doesn't even have criminal authority. The officers hesitated. One looked nervous now. The third, quiet until now, muttered, We were given go-ahead from Lieutenant Randall. Of course. Randall, Karen Lockwood's pickleball buddy, a 30-year badge with more whiskey in his veins than ink in his reports. That explained a lot. I sighed and turned around. Let's not make a scene, I said to Abigail. Let them do it. This isn't over, she growled. I didn't resist. They cuffed me, walked me down my own porch like I was a meth dealer with a knife in his sock, and shoved me into the back of the cruiser. Cold vinyl. No headroom. They didn't even bother to read me my rights. The station smelled like stale coffee and Lysol. They booked me like they'd been waiting for this day, fingerprinted me with smug indifference, and tossed me into a holding cell barely big enough for 2 people. No explanation, no call, no Miranda. The first 12 hours crawled by like blood through molasses. I kept thinking of Abigail, of what strings she'd be pulling, who she'd be calling, which doors she'd be kicking open. By hour 23, I was still in the same damn cell, eating a bologna sandwich that tasted like printer paper and silence. Then the door opened. The same officer, Mustache, stood there, looking like a man who just realized his zipper was down during a sermon. "You're being released." I stood slowly. "Just like that?" He didn't answer. I walked out into the processing area where Abigail stood, arms crossed, paperwork in hand, flanked by 2 suits in gray, not her usual assistant DAs. She didn't smile. It took a state-level injunction to override this garbage warrant. And I just got off the phone with Judge Evers. He's furious, wants to see that warrant himself. You're lucky you didn't spend the weekend in that cage. I'm not sure I'd call that luck. One of the men beside her stepped forward. Tall, lean, wearing a black badge clipped inside his jacket. "Agent Delaney," he said, shaking my hand. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." I blinked. "We've been monitoring irregularities in county land records and emergency procedures for about 8 months now. Your situation brought up interesting red flags." "You mean the part where I got arrested for telling a woman to get off my dock?" He nodded. "And the part where a local HOA president has county officers signing midnight warrants outside their jurisdiction. Mind if we talk sometime soon?" I nodded. I was about to suggest the same. When I got back to the house, the sun was just beginning to rise again. 2 full days, and it looked exactly as I left it, except now I noticed the cameras. Motion sensors. New ones. Abigail had them installed while I was inside. "You expecting trouble?" I asked her as she unpacked from the car. She looked at me sideways. "I'm not expecting it." "Then what?" "I'm counting on it." The day after I got out of holding, the clouds broke over the lake like a curtain being drawn back. A perfect spring day. Too perfect. The kind of day where the world tries to convince you nothing bad ever happened, like a cheap apology from nature. I didn't buy it. I spent the morning triple-checking my boundary markers, drone footage, and property maps. Every rock, tree, and inch of shoreline was mine. The deed from my uncle, God rest him, was ironclad, filed in 1958, reaffirmed in the early 2000s after a minor zoning shuffle, and notarized twice over. That lake was private property, plain and simple. Always had been. Always would be. But something about the whole thing gnawed at me. HOA presidents don't just fabricate assault claims, pull police strings, and fake seizures over a dock dispute, unless there's more going on. I told Abigail I wanted to dig deeper. She didn't hesitate. Over the next 2 days, she called in a few favors. Former colleagues at the county records office, a quiet clerk at zoning, and even a cranky ex-inspector who owed her a debt from a voter fraud case. They gave us more than we expected. Clearview Shores HOA has filed 12 motions in the last year to reassess adjoining non-HOA lands, Abigail said, flipping through a manila folder at my kitchen table. They've petitioned the county 3 times to reclassify this lake and surrounding parcels as transitional access zones. I raised an eyebrow. Transitional to what? To public utility, she replied, which means parks, rec zones, fishing easements, and here's the kicker. If those motions passed, the landowner would be legally required to sell at assessed value or enter long-term leasing agreements with the county. In other words, I muttered, they were setting me up for forced acquisition. She nodded. Or at the very least, turning your home into a public hiking stop. The maps were the next punch in the gut. She showed me 2 sets, one official, one suspiciously unofficial. The official one, dated March of this year, had my property outlined in green, private, secure, well-buffered. The second map, also bearing a county seal but issued by a contract GIS vendor, had a red dotted overlay labeled Community Buffer Zone Phase 1. That's not just a fake, I said. That's a blueprint. Look closer, Abigail said, tapping a point along the shoreline. There's a pier labeled Recreational Deck A. That's your dock, Milo. They literally copied your structure onto a public asset map. That's not oversight, I said. That's theft. And premeditated, she added. This wasn't just Karen freelancing. This was approved internally by the HOA council, who then funneled it through a zoning contractor based out of Boise. Who paid the contractor? HOA funds. We traced the transaction this morning. So, not only were they trying to seize my land, but they were using homeowners' dues to do it. Hell of a racket. We didn't stop there. Abigail's old paralegal, a genius with databases and no social life, cross-checked the list of noise complaints, environmental violations, and safety alerts issued to my property over the past year. There were 11. I'd received 2. 9 had been quietly filed, never delivered, never acted on. but conveniently stacked to create a paper trail of ongoing behavioral concerns. Most of the names on the complaints were nonsense. One was signed Douglas L. Fenimore, who'd been dead for 4 years. 2 more were written by people who didn't appear in any tax or voter database in the state of Idaho. They were inventing ghosts to accuse me of being dangerous. I sat back in my chair and stared out at the lake. Have they done this to anyone else? I asked. Abigail hesitated. There are 2 other complaints on record, both from residents whose land bordered HOA lines. One case is sealed. The other's still pending. But in both cases, HOA tried to challenge property lines after building temporary community structures too close to their fences. Testing the perimeter. Exactly. That night, I installed 2 more motion-activated floodlights and a 3rd trail. Cam up in the tree line. Something told me they weren't done trying. Sure enough, the next morning, I caught a glimpse of a blue sedan parked just off the access road near the old maintenance path, technically county land, but nobody ever stopped there. 2 men sat inside, windows cracked, no plates on the front, and binoculars on the dash. I took the long way around, came up behind them through the woods, and snapped a few photos from 50 yards. They didn't notice. I didn't approach. Something told me they weren't with the HOA. Too discreet. Too quiet. Later, I showed Abigail the photos. Her eyes narrowed. Those look like federal plates. Faint yellow bar. FBI? Maybe Internal Affairs or Land Commission. But they're watching something. Or someone, she nodded. And right now, your property is the hottest thing in the county. I leaned back and looked out over the lake again. It shimmered in the early evening light, beautiful and quiet, like always. But now I knew better. Someone was watching, and someone else was moving pieces behind the curtain. They came just after lunch on a Tuesday, like a knockoff sequel to a bad movie. I was sanding down the steps to the dock when I heard the crunch of tires. Slow, deliberate, not like a neighbor dropping by. I turned toward the access path just in time to see a county-marked SUV pull up. No sirens, no lights. 2 men stepped out. Both wore uniforms. Tan shirts, dark green pants, sheriff patches. The kind of getup you could buy online if you knew the right keywords. The taller one had a clipboard in hand and the easy swagger of someone who thought a badge was a get-out-of-jail-free card. The other lingered near the vehicle, holding a phone that he angled casually toward the house like he was texting, except he wasn't. He was recording. I didn't move, didn't wave, just watched them walk up the gravel path like they owned it. Afternoon, clipboard said. We're conducting a voluntary site check based on a flagged safety concern regarding firearm storage and wildlife attractants. You got a minute? I didn't respond right away. I was busy staring at his name tag. It said R. Mansfield. That name rang a bell, but not from any sheriff's list I'd seen. You got ID? I asked. He held out a laminated card, not a badge, not standard issue. It looked like something a park ranger might carry. If the park were imaginary. What department you with, again? Bonner County Sheriff's Office, he said too quickly. Just a community wellness check. No need to make it formal. I smirked. Well, that's good, because if you had a warrant, you'd know I'd be within my rights to demand you leave it at the gate and come back with your supervisor. He tilted his head. Just trying to keep things friendly, Mr. Crane. I turned to the second guy, still by the vehicle, still recording. Poorly, too, I might add. His phone was barely aligned, and his lens had a smudge the size of a dime. You recording my property? I asked. He didn't answer. Just kept the phone up and turned away, like I'd asked if he wanted to dance. All right, gentlemen, I said, stepping forward and flipping the switch on my own shoulder cam. Let's level the playing field. Clipboard's jaw tightened. I'm going to ask once, I continued. Are you here on official duty with a filed service request from your department, or are you engaging in unauthorized surveillance at the behest of a private entity, namely the Clearview Shores HOA? You don't need to get aggressive. I'm not, yet, but I know every deputy in this county, and neither of you were at the last briefing I attended. So again, who sent you? The second man walked back toward us slowly. He didn't look nervous, just annoyed that the play wasn't working. We're here on Karen Lockwood's authorization, he said. She's concerned about potential hazards on your property affecting neighboring lots. There it was. I almost laughed. You're not with the sheriff's office. He raised his eyebrows. You sure? I'm damn sure, because I just called Sheriff Hallbrook 10 minutes ago. That was a lie, but it worked. Clipboard flinched. Now, I continued, before I file a complaint for impersonation of a peace officer, unlawful surveillance, and trespassing on private land, I want to see department IDs. Not your best Kinko's effort, real credentials. Silence. Thought so, I said. Now, kindly walk yourselves off my property before I make this a federal matter. That got their attention. They turned, muttering to each other, and climbed back into the SUV. As they pulled away, I snapped their plates, partially obscured naturally, and sent them straight to Abigail. Less than 2 hours later, I got a call back. "You're going to want to sit down," she said. "I'm already standing in a swamp, might as well sink." The guy who spoke, the tall one, Robert Mansfield? Yeah. He's a former deputy, got moved to admin leave 2 years ago after a civil suit over unlawful entry. He's not supposed to be in uniform, technically not even authorized to wear the patch. And the cameraman. Private contractor, event security guy, works HOA events, friend of Karen's. Real name's Denny Kearns. He's never been law enforcement. I let that sink in. So, what we've got is 2 men impersonating officers conducting an illegal inspection, filming my home without warrant, cause, or authority at the request of the HOA. Yup. I didn't respond. I just let the silence stretch until it hurt. "I've already filed a formal complaint," Abigail said. "But this is big, Milo, real big." That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the pines, I checked the trail cams again. One caught the SUV backing out at an angle that showed a small emblem on the side. Not the sheriff's crest, just a sticker, a damn decoration. I uploaded everything and created a secure drive folder labeled HOA Overreach Incident. At this point, I wasn't just defending property, I was building a case. They didn't come back the next day or the day after, but Karen did, in spirit. It started with a local news segment that aired on Channel 7 out of Coeur d'Alene. A polished anchor with 2 white teeth introduced the piece as a community spotlight on access inequality. And there she was, Karen Lockwood, standing by a manicured fountain in front of the Clearview Shores Clubhouse, speaking in her trademark, syrupy voice. "This lake has been part of our visual and emotional landscape for decades," she said. "And as our community grows, we believe recreational access should reflect modern values, equity, health, and nature for all. It's not about taking anything. It's about sharing what was always part of our environment." Behind her stood a smiling family of 4, holding fishing poles and wearing HOA branded caps, like some sort of deranged ad campaign. They even used a drone shot of my damn dock, blurred just enough to avoid a lawsuit, but not enough for me to miss the flagpole. Karen had officially gone public. That same day, the HOA submitted a formal petition to the county, proposed designation of Lake Wilburn as Recreational Access Zone, Phase 1, accompanied by over 200 signatures, most of which, according to Abigail's first look, were conveniently collected at a wine and cheese social. "This isn't outreach," I muttered as we read through the proposal at my kitchen table. "It's a land grab wrapped in granola and civic virtue." Abigail nodded. "It's slick. I'll give her that. But too slick. You can't fake public interest without leaving fingerprints." So we dug. First came the land deed again. My uncle's file from 1958 included a little-known clause in the original transfer from the Federal Bureau of Land Management, a permanent private use designation stamped with language that could stop a train, non-negotiable isolation, of water access rights in perpetuity. Next, we compiled satellite images showing the complete absence of footpaths, boats, or any HOA structures even near the waterline until after the Karen drone stunt. Then we went after the signatures. I handed off the petition list to Abigail's paralegal, Sam, a guy who could find voter fraud in a Girl Scout sign-up sheet. Within 24 hours, he flagged 32 duplicate names, 12 fake addresses, and 7 signatures from people who didn't even live in Idaho. It was like peeling wallpaper soaked in mold. The deeper we went, the worse it smelled. But the real knockout came from an unexpected source, my uncle's archive. He was a meticulous man, even after retirement. Turns out, he'd kept correspondence with the county going back 30 years, including a certified letter where he explicitly rejected a proposal to annex the lake into a shared use agreement, citing environmental risks and personal rights. That rejection had been notarized, countersigned by a now-retired county commissioner, and stored in a fireproof box I hadn't even opened until now. Abigail's eyes lit up like a trial lawyer's Christmas morning. "This is your nuke," she whispered. "File it? Hell yes." We submitted the full packet to the county zoning board, attaching a legal memorandum and formal opposition under state property protection statutes. It was clear, complete, and polite, but buried under the language was the legal equivalent of a dagger in the ribs. And then we went one step further. We leaked it. The same local news station that gave Karen her 15 minutes got an anonymous envelope with the real maps, the fake signatures, and a copy of the deed stamped with BLM language so old school it might as well have been carved on stone. 3 days later, the tone on the evening news changed. The anchor no longer smiled. The phrase "unauthorized land pressure by HOA" was used. A brief interview with a retired judge, who just happened to be vacationing at my guest cabin, aired immediately after. "These kinds of pressure tactics are not uncommon," he said, "but they're rarely this brazen. Especially when the target is clearly protected under both county and federal documentation." Karen didn't appear on the next broadcast. Instead, a PR firm representing the HOA issued a limp statement about miscommunications and shared hopes for community dialogue. That night, their website went down for maintenance. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The county board announced a temporary freeze on the proposal, pending investigation. Meanwhile, Abigail got a call from someone in the state's Internal Oversight Commission. "They're sniffing around Clearview Shores now," she told me. "The land designations, the petitions, even the GIS files. Apparently your little lake just became Exhibit A in a much bigger audit." I looked out over the water. Wind rippled across its surface like a shiver. There were no boats, no children, no intruders, just silence and pine and the reflection of the sky. They wanted to make it public. Too late. It already was. The air changed after the freeze, not just figuratively, literally. A dry summer wind rolled in from the west, stirring the pine needles with a different kind of whisper, less peaceful, more electric. Like the land itself was bracing for what came next. So was I. I wasn't just defending anymore, I was hunting. The day after the zoning board's announcement, I filed 3 formal complaints. One with the county sheriff's department citing impersonation of officers and unauthorized surveillance. One with the Idaho Attorney General's office detailing HOA misuse of funds for falsified land initiatives. And the third, most important, went straight to the local FBI field office. That one had attachments, drone footage, badge photos, forged maps, fake petitions, and a 30-page memo from Abigail titled simply, "Systematic Overreach and Coordinated Fraud by Clearview Shores HOA." I knew it wouldn't just sit on someone's desk, because by then, someone was already watching. Agent Delaney showed up 2 days later, this time with a second agent, Morales. Both in plain clothes, serious, composed, not the kind of guys who knock unless they've already read your mail. "We're now officially opening a case," Delaney said as we sat on my deck overlooking the water. "Land fraud, municipal corruption, and possible civil rights violations. Your property sits at the center of a pattern we've seen before: selective targeting of non-member landowners, forced boundary erosion, and the manufacturing of consent." I blinked. Manufacturing of consent? That sounds like something out of a Chomsky seminar. "It means they're faking democracy to steal land," Morales said bluntly. "And your situation has enough documentation to anchor a full inquiry." They asked questions for nearly an hour. About Karen, about the HOA board, about the people who'd tried to enter my property, the old deputy, the fake cameraman, the drone incident. They wanted it all. "Have you received any direct threats?" Morales asked. "Not unless you count Karen's face on the news." Delaney nodded. "We'll be in touch." That night, I installed new motion sensors along the southern tree line. I upgraded the solar battery for the trail cam tower, set up redundant recording storage, and marked my property boundaries with reflective tape. Not because I needed to, but because it made a point. I also took the time to reinforce the gate with a new lock and welded steel plate. It wasn't about paranoia, it was about message control. You don't walk onto my land and call it yours. Meanwhile, Abigail was deep in her own war. She started combing HOA meeting minutes, some public, some leaked by a mole she wouldn't name. What she found was gold. "There's language here," she told me, holding up a printout, about strategic revisualization of adjacent parcels. That's a fancy way of saying, we're going to gaslight everyone into thinking this lake was always meant to be shared. Let me guess, I said. No vote, just internal discussions. Exactly. They never submitted this for community approval. They knew it wouldn't pass. But it looks like someone inside the HOA had a direct line to county GIS staff. She paused, then added, or someone higher. I knew what that meant. State-level collusion. Maybe more. So we pushed harder. Abigail submitted a motion to the district court demanding an injunction against any further HOA action relating to my property. She also filed for a forensic audit of HOA funds, citing the payments made to the Boise Mapping Company. But it was the press that made the next move. A journalist from the Spokesman Review showed up with a press badge, a drone of his own, and a voice recorder. Young guy. Hungry. The type who dreams of breaking the next big corruption case. I've been tracking HOA-related land seizures across the Pacific Northwest, he said. Yours is the first case with a federal angle. Mind if I tell your story? I looked out at the lake, then back at him. Just make sure you tell it right. The article dropped 3 days later. Headline, When HOAs Go Rogue, One Man's Fight for His Land Sparks Federal Probe. It went viral within 48 hours. Suddenly, HOA members, real homeowners, started asking questions. Karen's support base began to splinter. A few even reached out to Abigail anonymously, confirming that dues had been raised for environmental security that never materialized. One even sent a PDF of a community improvement memo that included a line item for property transition campaign materials. Campaign materials, paid for by HOA funds, to push a fake narrative. If that's not embezzlement, I don't know what is. But the real firestorm came when Agent Delaney called again. We've connected your case to another in Oregon, he said. Same playbook, different HOA, same contractor, same lawyer. Looks like this may be bigger than just one community. I whistled low. Can I ask something? I said. Sure. Is this the part where you take over, or do I still get to fight? Delaney chuckled. Oh, you still get to fight. But now you've got back up. I ended that day on the dock, watching the last light fade over the water. The wind was still moving, but it no longer whispered like warning. Now it sounded like momentum. I always thought justice moved like molasses. Slow, sticky, and mostly useless unless you had a fire under it. Turns out if you stack enough evidence, light the right matches, and make enough noise, justice can sprint like a damn cheetah. The indictments dropped on a Wednesday. I was on the porch splitting firewood when Abigail called. I didn't even get a hello. They filed, all of it. 7 counts against Karen, 3 officers suspended. County's internal audit just froze the HOA's accounts. I didn't say anything, just wiped my hands on a rag and waited for the rest. Forgery, false reporting, unlawful surveillance, conspiracy to interfere with protected property rights, abuse of public office, and, you'll love this, attempted fraudulent reclassification of jurisdictional boundaries. I let out a long breath, through my nose. That's a hell of a charge sheet. And it's just the beginning. The state is stepping in now. They want full oversight of HOA operations across the region. Your lake case opened the dam. I didn't smile. Not yet. Not until I saw her in cuffs. Which, to be fair, didn't take long. That night, the evening news led with it. Karen Lockwood, arrested in her own home during what was supposed to be a board meeting. Hair wrapped tight, lips tight, and cuffs tight. The footage showed her being walked to the cruiser while neighbors watched from their driveways, some with hands over their mouths, others with phones recording. It was poetic, but the real justice was in the documents. The county prosecutor released the full affidavit the next morning, nearly 60 pages. Inside were excerpts from internal HOA emails where Karen described my property as low-hanging fruit, and another where she said, if we squeeze hard enough, he'll either sell or slip. They weren't just acting entitled. They were plotting extortion. 3 HOA board members were indicted alongside her. One of them, a zoning advisor who'd funneled private maps to the fake GIS contractor. Another was a retired officer who'd signed off on safety complaints that never made it into public records, but were used to justify escalation. And the icing. Lieutenant Randall, Mr. Late Night Warrant, was placed on administrative leave pending criminal investigation for abuse of authority and collusion with a non-governmental body to conduct an unlawful arrest. Abigail met with the district judge 2 days later to finalize an emergency protection order. I didn't even have to testify in person. The footage, documents, and legal violations spoke for themselves. The ruling was clear. Clearview Shores HOA was barred from taking any action involving my property or adjacent buffer land. A 500-yard restriction was established around the lake perimeter. The HOA was stripped of zoning privileges, financial authority, and pending projects. In other words, they were neutered. I watched their maintenance crew remove the fancy stone HOA sign from the road 2 days later. Nobody said a word, not even the guy operating the backhoe. They just pulled the damn thing up, tossed it in a flatbed, and drove away. The next morning, a new notice went up in front of the community office. By order of the court, HOA operation suspended pending state review. Meanwhile, my inbox exploded. Local residents, some HOA members, some not, began reaching out. Some to apologize, others to ask if I was okay. A few asked if I'd testify on their behalf in unrelated property disputes. Turns out, when you drag a monster into the light, others start checking under their own beds. The real surprise came from Agent Morales. He called just after dinner one evening. We've officially added Clearview Shores to our federal investigation. Cross-state implications. Looks like this might be part of a much larger coordinated fraud ring involving property management companies, HOA boards, and zoning contractors. I leaned back in my chair, staring out of the window at the lake, where a pair of loons drifted quietly. Across the glass. Glad I could help, I said. You've done more than help. You've drawn a line. That night, I finally slept like a man with walls around him again, not made of wood or laws, but of truth. It didn't just protect me, it made them afraid to try again. The courthouse was quieter than I expected. I didn't attend the sentencing in person. Abigail offered, and part of me wanted to be there, to see Karen's face as the gavel fell, but I'd spent enough time around courtrooms in my life. I knew what justice sounded like, and I didn't need to hear it again to believe it. 13 years. That was the final number. Karen Lockwood, once queen of curated lawns and subcommittees, now inmate number whatever the hell at the Idaho Women's Correctional Center. 7 felony counts. No parole until at least year 9. The judge didn't mince words in his closing statement. Your actions reflect not just administrative overreach, but a deliberate assault on property rights, personal liberty, and public trust. Her co-conspirators got between 3 and 9 years. Most took plea deals once the paper trail caught up with them. Randall lost his pension and, from what I heard, broke down crying during his deposition. I won't pretend I felt bad. HOA, gone. Officially dissolved. The state stepped in like a wrecking crew with law degrees. They audited the books, clawed back over $400,000 in misused funds, and banned any of the prior board members from serving in any residential leadership role again. For life. But the part that mattered most to me wasn't the handcuffs or the headlines. It was the designation. After a joint review by the State Historical Commission and the Department of Land and Resource Management, my land, specifically the lake and surrounding forest, was granted official status as privately protected cultural heritage. It meant no HOA, no development, no commercial interest could touch it. Not now, not ever. The state even funded a small granite marker which I helped install at the trailhead near the western bank. Private property. False claims will not open the gate. They will open a cell. The press loved it, but I didn't put it there for them. I put it there for the next guy, the one who owns 5 acres just past HOA lines and thinks he's alone. He's not. Not anymore. The story went further than I expected. After that Spokesman Review article went national, a state legislator proposed a new bill, the Crane Act, aimed at criminalizing coordinated fraud by residential associations with the intent to dispossess private landowners. It passed in the House with overwhelming support. Abigail got promoted to Assistant State Attorney General. She still drops by every couple months just to remind me she's the only person allowed to use the guest room without permission. Agent Delaney emailed me once after the indictments wrapped up. Just a subject line. 1 down, 3 more HOAs under review. Stay ready. I replied, the cameras are still rolling, but the truth is, it got quiet. Blissfully, beautifully quiet. No more late-night engines, no more fake uniforms, no more petitions, drones, or courtesy visits. Just me, the pines, and the water. That's all I ever wanted. And now, finally, no one can take it.